The city never slept, but for 16-year-old Ethan, the noise of honking cars and neon signs was nothing more than background music to his endless struggle. He was a boy without a roof, a boy whose world was made up of cardboard shelters, hand-me-down jackets, and half-eaten sandwiches fished out of trash bins. Life had robbed him early, but in his dark brown eyes, there was still a flicker of determination, the kind that refused to die. Ethan had a knack for fixing things. Old radios, broken toys, watches missing hands, if it was busted, he could bring it back to life. His hands, calloused and small, carried a gift no one had nurtured, yet it grew naturally, like a stubborn weed in cracked concrete. People in the neighborhood called him the fixer boy, though most never bothered to look at him twice. One cold night, Ethan huddled against the back of a luxury restaurant, his thin blanket doing little against the biting wind. The clink of wine glasses and laughter from inside painted a picture of wealth he would never touch. He lowered his head, trying to block it out, when suddenly, a voice sliced through the night. "Please, someone help." Ethan's head shot up. The voice didn't come from inside the restaurant but from the dark alley beside it. Curious and cautious, he crept toward the sound. What he found made him pause. A man in his late 50s sat on the ground, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair wild, and his eyes red from tears. He wasn't just any man, Ethan recognized him from newspaper stands and television screens. Richard Halden, a self-made millionaire, the owner of Halden Enterprises, a man the world envied. But tonight, he was broken. "Sir." Ethan's voice cracked. Richard turned sharply, startled. His face twisted with despair. "Go away, kid. You can't help me." But Ethan didn't leave. He stepped closer, ignoring the stench of spilled liquor. "You were crying for help. What happened?" Richard let out a bitter laugh. "What happened? Everything. My company is falling apart, my family doesn't speak to me, and all the money in the world can't fix what I've broken." Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't know much about stocks or corporate crashes, but he knew pain when he saw it. I can fix things," he said softly. Richard's hollow eyes studied the boy. "Fix things? You think you can fix a ruined man's life?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But I can try. You said nobody can help you. Maybe that's because you never asked the right person." The words, simple yet disarming, caught Richard off guard. Nobody had dared to speak to him like that, not his employees, not his so-called friends. For the first time in months, he felt curious. "What do you mean by fixing?" Richard asked, almost mocking. Ethan shrugged. "Sometimes things aren't broken. They're just ignored. Like an old toy. People throw it away, but I look closer, clean it up, give it patience, and suddenly it works again. Maybe your life's like that too. Maybe it's not broken, maybe it just needs someone to care enough to fix it." Richard's throat tightened. No board meeting, no therapist, no family member had ever put it that way. And yet, this boy, this homeless, ragged boy, spoke like he carried wisdom forged by suffering. Ethan bent down, picking up a gold pen that had fallen from Richard's coat pocket. Its clip was broken. Within seconds, Ethan twisted the tiny metal, adjusted it, and handed it back. "See, not new, not perfect, but working again." Richard stared at the pen. Something stirred deep inside him. For the first time in years, he whispered, "Maybe I do need fixing." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then let me try." The millionaire and the homeless boy sat in silence under the flickering alley light, a bond forming between two shattered souls, one who had everything but felt empty, and one who had nothing but still carried hope. That night, Richard made a choice. He didn't send Ethan away. Instead, he asked, "What's your name, kid?" "Ethan," he replied. "Then, Ethan," Richard said, his voice softer than before, "teach me what I can't seem to learn on my own." And with those words, a journey neither of them expected began. Richard Halden never imagined himself sitting on a curb in a back alley with a homeless boy as his teacher. Yet as dawn painted the city in gray and gold, there he was, still in the same rumpled suit, still nursing the same ache in his chest, but strangely lighter, as though Ethan's words had loosened a chain around his heart. "All right, fixer boy," Richard said, trying to sound amused, though his voice trembled. "If you're going to teach me how to fix my life, where do we start?" Ethan tilted his head, his messy hair catching the weak light. "We start with the little things. Big things fall apart because people forget the small things that hold them together." Richard frowned. "Like what?" "Like listening," Ethan replied simply. Richard scoffed. "I listen to people all day. To my managers, to my lawyers, to shareholders. Listening hasn't helped me." "No," Ethan shook his head. You hear them. That's different from listening. Hearing is noise. Listening is when you stop thinking about yourself long enough to feel what someone else feels. The words cut deeper than Richard expected. He thought of his estranged daughter, Anna. He remembered the way her voice had cracked when she told him he never cared about her dreams, only his empire. At the time, he had dismissed her tears as childish rebellion. But now, with Ethan's steady gaze on him, he wondered if he had never truly listened to her. Richard looked at the boy. You sound like a philosopher. Ethan laughed, a quick, rusty sound. No, I'm just someone who's had a lot of time to watch people. When you're invisible, you see everything others miss. The truth in that statement made Richard shiver. For the next week, Richard found himself returning to that alley. At first, he told himself it was curiosity. But deep inside, he knew he craved something Ethan had, clarity. Every evening, after pretending to manage his crumbling company by day, he came back to sit beside the boy who smelled of old blankets and street smoke. And every evening, Ethan gave him lessons. Lesson 1. Gratitude. Ethan pulled a bruised apple from his pocket and split it with Richard. Most people waste food. For me, this is a feast. Try to eat it slowly and thank it. Richard felt ridiculous at first, chewing with deliberate care. But halfway through, he realized he hadn't tasted anything in years. Meals for him had been meetings, not moments. That night, the apple filled more than his stomach, it humbled him. Lesson 2. Patience. Ethan showed Richard a broken pocket watch he had scavenged. It doesn't tick anymore, but if you're patient, it will. He spent hours adjusting the tiny gears while Richard watched. At last, the faint tick-tick returned. See, most people throw away what doesn't work fast enough. But if you wait, if you stay, you'll find it still has life. Richard thought of his marriage, his daughter, his business. How quickly he had given up when things grew complicated. Lesson 3. Value. One night, Ethan asked Richard to describe his greatest possession. Richard thought of his mansion, his car collection, his art gallery. But when he spoke the words out loud, they sounded hollow. Ethan then held up his blanket, torn and thin. This is mine. It's not worth much money, but it's worth everything because it keeps me alive. Value isn't about price, it's about what something means to your heart. The statement hit Richard harder than any financial loss. One evening, Richard finally confessed. Ethan, my company is going under. I made decisions driven by greed, not people. My wife left because I chose profit over love. My daughter, she won't even answer my calls. I don't know how to fix any of that. Ethan listened quietly, his dark eyes unblinking. You can't fix it all at once. Start small. Call your daughter. Not as a boss, not as a rich man, just as a father who misses her. Tell her you're ready to listen. Richard's throat closed. And if she refuses? Ethan smiled faintly. Then wait. Be patient. Like the watch. Sometimes people need time to tick again. For the first time in years, Richard felt tears sting his eyes, not from despair, but from hope. He looked at the boy, shivering under his blanket, yet shining with a wisdom money could never buy. Why are you helping me, Ethan? I'm no one to you. Ethan shrugged. Because you asked. And because one day, maybe someone will help me too. That night, Richard didn't return to his mansion. Instead, he stayed beside Ethan, under the stars. A millionaire with nothing left, and a homeless boy with everything that mattered. And for the first time in years, Richard slept without nightmares. The next morning, Richard Halden stood outside a payphone booth with shaking hands. The weight of Ethan's advice echoed in his ears. Start small. Call your daughter. Be patient. For a man who once negotiated billion-dollar contracts without flinching, dialing his daughter's number felt like climbing Mount Everest barefoot. His fingers hovered over the buttons, then froze. Ethan nudged him gently. You've fixed pens and watches with me, right? Think of this the same way. One gear at a time. Richard drew a shaky breath, then dialed. The line rang. Once. Twice. His heart hammered. Finally, a tired female voice answered. Hello, Anna, Richard whispered. Silence. Then, sharp and cold, what do you want? I just want to listen. Those words, simple yet trembling with sincerity, stopped her from hanging up. Richard closed his eyes and let Ethan's lessons guide him. He didn't talk about himself, his business, or his regrets. He asked about her, her job, her art, her life. And when she hesitated, he said, take your time. I'll wait. For the first time in 5 years, father and daughter spoke without shouting. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed. But it was a beginning, a ticking sound in a watch long thought broken. When Richard hung up, Tears rolled down his cheeks. She didn't forgive me, he whispered. But she didn't shut me out either. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile only someone who understood brokenness could give. That means it's working. In the weeks that followed, Richard began to change. With Ethan's quiet wisdom, he started repairing not just his family ties, but his soul. He stopped dining at luxury restaurants alone and instead shared simple meals with the boy who had become his unlikely guide. He returned to his company not as the untouchable CEO but as a man willing to listen. For the first time, he walked through the factory floor, speaking to workers whose names he had never bothered to learn. Some were skeptical, others suspicious, but slowly, respect replaced fear. Whenever he faltered, Ethan reminded him, "Don't rush. Fix one gear at a time." One chilly evening, Richard noticed Ethan coughing badly, his thin body shaking under the threadbare blanket. Concern stabbed him. "Ethan, you can't stay out here. Come with me." But Ethan shook his head. "I don't belong in your world." Richard's voice grew firm. "And I don't belong in yours. But maybe that's why we need each other." He took Ethan home, not to the mansion filled with echoes of loneliness, but to a modest apartment he had moved into after leaving the cold marble halls of wealth behind. It wasn't gilded, but it was warm. For the first time in years, Richard cooked, not for a client, but for a boy who had taught him what money never could. Months passed. Richard's relationship with Anna grew slowly, fragile but real. The company survived, reshaped not by ruthless ambition but by new values of patience and gratitude. People began to whisper that Halden Enterprises was no longer a giant with claws, but a family with hands that built instead of destroyed. But the biggest change wasn't in Richard's business, it was in him. He laughed more, listened longer, and valued not what glittered, but what mattered. And Ethan, the boy who once fixed scraps on the street now had a mentor, a guardian, and a future. Richard enrolled him in school, bought him books instead of spare parts, and gave him a desk to fix more than toys, this time, his own life. One evening, as they sat together watching the city lights, Ethan turned to him. "You fixed me, you know." Richard chuckled softly. "No, Ethan, you fixed me first." The boy smiled. "Then I guess we fixed each other." Years later, people would tell the strange story of Richard Halden, the millionaire who nearly lost everything but rebuilt his life with the help of a homeless boy. They spoke of a man who traded power for humility, greed for patience, and loneliness for love. And in Richard's office, on a shelf above his desk, sat a small broken pen and an old pocket watch, reminders of the night he found hope in an alley. Whenever someone asked about them, he would smile and say, "They're proof that nothing is truly broken. Sometimes, it just needs someone who cares enough to fix it." And beside him, always, was Ethan, the boy who taught a millionaire what it truly meant to live.